India's services sector contributes over 60% to its GDP, but employs only about 28%, which is a figure of 2014. From healthcare to tourism to space to logistics and transportation, the potential of the services sector in India is immense. However, has enough been done to help the sector realize its true potential? Is India still largely reliant on traditional ITES to fuel growth? How can India harness its distinctive competitive advantages in an ever-changing world? To speak about such issues and more, we have Mr. Sandeep Narula, Chairman, Electronics and Computer Software Export Promotion Council, Kanika Tekriwal, Founder and CEO, JetSetGo, Anurag Katriar, President, National Restaurant Association of India, Dr. Nisha Taneja, Professor at the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations. Thank you all for joining us today.
Good to be here, Pran. Thank you.
So, Dr. Taneja, let me come first to you and set some context. Services covers a wide range of activities, but give us a context on the importance of the sector for India.
Yes, thank you, Pran. The services sector undoubtedly is a very important sector in our economy, simply by its sheer size. It accounts for 54% of India's gross value added. That's what it accounted for in 2021. And if you look at its composition, we find that basically financial and other services accounted for 23%, and trade, hotel, and others accounted for 16%, and public administration and other services accounted for another 15%. So there are various aspects of size that we can look at. For instance, if we look at it in terms of FDI, interestingly, this has been a sector which has drawn in the largest amount of FDI. So, for instance, in the last 20 years, we've attracted $83 billion worth of FDI in this sector. But what's happened is that almost 75% of this amount has actually gone into the computer hardware and software sector. So it's very concentrated even within the services sector. And another interesting thing that's happened is that in the last 1 year, a major chunk of FDI came into this sector, and that we're talking about the COVID year here. So, and that's about $18 billion that we got into this sector. And it's not surprising because, what's happened is that there's been a lot of automation. Businesses have been forced to do that. And a lot of this FDI is likely to be used to support technology enablement across sectors and across the value chain. So that's another aspect of size. And yet another aspect, I think, is in terms of exports, which you mentioned also. A large amount of exports come from the services sector. In 2021, it was worth $200 billion. Of course, it dipped in the COVID year, but only very slightly. By about 3.3% it declined in the COVID year. Now here again, I think the problem is that it's again very concentrated. 50% of our services exports are actually in software exports. So again, we're talking about a very concentrated export basket. It's also contributed significantly to employment. 28% of employment, as you mentioned, comes from the services sector. Of course, in the COVID year, actually, there was a contraction in the services sector, and the total contraction was about 5%. But if we compare it across the three segments that we were talking about, then the major decline was actually in the hotels and trade sector, which was 15%. But in the other two segments, the contraction was less than 1%. So, it's just one segment which accounted for a very large chunk of this contraction. And very clearly, we can see that these were the contact-intensive industries, sectors where we saw this decline. So that's about the importance of the sector.
So from what Dr. Taneja said, it seems like, the software and the computer segment is the one which is pushing the services segment, both in terms of FDI plus business. How was last year and how does it look like this year? How does this year?
Well, let me at the outset give you slight numbers for the software sector. The software sector is very strong in India. It's basically talent, the mind that we have in India, and that is what drives the business for software for us. We did about $146 billion of export in 2021. Despite the pandemic, we have seen about 3% growth in the year over 1920. So last 1920, we did about $143 billion. And then this year, 2021, we have done $146 billion. As mentioned, the software and the computer hardware software sector attracts large part of FDI. That is correct, because the sector is growing over a period of time. If you have seen, when the council started in 1989, the software sector, which largely has the figure from the service industry, was few $1 million. And in 2021, we have reached to $146 billion and attracted a huge FDI and culminating into a robust foreign exchange inflow for India. We hope that this year, despite the limitations, second wave, third wave, so far the sector is going strong, and we are likely to see a substantial jump in the figures in this year also.
Right. So, Kanika, yours is another sector which, I mean, while aviation as a sector hasn't done well, but yours is a segment within it which seems to be doing well. How's business?
You know, Pran, I think it's this is a common misconception. We're not doing well. We're staying afloat, is the way I would put it, because, you know, luckily for us, we are able to reach places where commercial airlines don't fly, or provide the perception of a safer operation because you're not sharing a plane with other people and things like that. But what we've got to understand is that, you know, Zoom is the new private jet for business, and 80% of our customers, you know, flew to do business meetings or for business purposes. I think the whole travel industry in India is controlled by business travel, and that's more or less come to a standstill. And you know, this is a trend that's here to stay. You're seeing commercial workplaces change. You're seeing the need to travel become lesser and lesser. Focus is shifting from business to leisure. So you know, I would say that we've been lucky where we've not, you know, had to really suffer or struggle. But at the same time, I don't think numbers have gone up, as the industry as a whole is still on the same place it was pre-COVID, slightly lower. But yeah, I would still say we're much better off than a lot of other industries comparatively.
So Anurag, both Sandeep and Kanika seem to be doing moderately okay. But yours is a sector which is still in a bit of trouble. How are things looking now?
Thank you. So, Pran, I think we are the poor cousins of the larger hospitality family. That's what it appears to be. No, but as Dr. Taneja was saying, I think the fact that we are very contact intensive is one of the reasons why this industry has suffered the most. And the way our business models are, it also meant that we had lots of, you know, a very high rate of mortality as well. We are still in bad shape because during the pandemic, whether phase 1 or phase 2, we were the first sector to be shut down and last ones to be allowed to open. Today, also, if you look at entire country, nobody is being allowed to operate beyond 50% of their capacities. And apart from that, every state has its own rules vis-a-vis how many hours you can operate and on what days of the week. Maharashtra, for example, is operating only for lunches on weekdays. Delhi is operating all days till X hours. So essentially, you know, even if there is a capacity, you are not in a position to utilize it. So yeah, tough times are here. The only saving grace or the only segment within the business which has been insulated to a certain degree has been the home delivery business. But then we have other troubles on that front because the way the current home delivery ecosystem works, it's not a profitable growth for anyone. Now, on the other side, if you look at a few segments within hospitality, like nightclubs, banqueting, bars, pubs, I mean, they are totally dead. How do they operate? So there is a lot more to lose. Or even, for example, a fine dining restaurant cannot survive on mere delivery because it's a lot to do with the experience, more than just stopping the tummy. Things are going to be tough for a while to come unless the vaccination reaches a certain stage of maturity or a certain critical mass. I don't see much changing for the F&B industry. But again, we are eternal optimists. We are hoping that will happen soon.
Wonderful. So, Dr. Taneja, if we can come to you, let's get to the the meat of this conversation. According to you, do you think the services sector is getting its due importance? And what are the kind of challenges it faces currently?
In terms of importance, I think this sector does get its due importance because we do recognize how important this sector is for the economy. And also in terms of, say, the programs that the government announces, on a continuous basis. And even in the last 1 year, there were specific ones that were targeted towards the services sectors. And it's quite impressive. So, for instance, there was this infusion of non-interest bearing bonds, and then there were many programs like BharatNet, the National Digital Health Mission, and the National Broadband Mission, and then also this objective of having 20% of the economy as a digital economy. That's also one of the programs, one of the objectives. And also a fresh tranche has been disbursed for skill development, and this is for new skills and for the post-COVID kind of skills that might be needed. But definitely here one would say is, which are the ones that are oriented towards services? That is not very clear, and maybe that's where the services sectors need to step in and say, these are our requirements, and this is how it needs to be channeled. And we're talking about employment in the services sector. We want to increase the share of employment. Then a large part of it is also going to be about training the workforce in the right manner. So skill development is going to be very, very important for the services sector. Then I think the other major challenge that the sector faces is, when we're talking about services, we're basically talking about regulations, the regulatory regimes, and the regulator, because that is what is driving the services sector. So it's really very important to have this structure in place and have a good, efficient structure in place. And now we have new sectors that are coming up, like the the digital services that are coming up in a big way. But there's a huge challenge. They need an enabling environment for them to prosper. And if I pick on some of the things that have really bothered the digital space, things like continuous changes in policies. How are small industries actually going to keep track of this? And how is there going to be an environment of certainty for firms to step in? So it becomes very difficult for small firms actually to enter in this kind of an environment. The other issue has been this confusion in objectives. We have the Make in India objective, and then we have the future of e-commerce, for instance. So and we don't have to choose one over the other. What we need to do is align the objectives. And let's take the example, for instance, of the consumer protection guideline, which states that e-commerce companies should place domestic goods along with foreign goods. Now, are we protecting the consumer by doing this? We can place it in the industrial policy context, but we're not protecting the consumer by doing that. So it's a misplaced objective. And so what does that mean for the e-commerce players? It's a very confused signal for the e-commerce players. Then again, our policies towards FDI, we are not very clear. Do we want them? Do we not want them? And this is not something new. It's not like we've not had foreign investment or we've not dealt with foreign investors in the past. We've done that with the manufacturing sector. We've seen the auto sector and many others. So it's nothing new. And okay, let's take the example of, say, Amazon. We know the benefits. You know, they've set up a huge logistic infrastructure. Uh, they've provided employment. There's been a lot of small enterprise integration. So there are benefits, but there is a genuine concern about data protection. So that has to be dealt with. But that doesn't mean that we don't need foreign investment. What we need to do is put the right regulation in place. We've got we've been having consultations about the regulation for the last 3 years on data privacy, but we still haven't come up with it. So it is a challenge that for this new economy to develop and for us to have this digital economy, we need to put this regulatory system in place. And we don't have very good examples of good regulations, unfortunately. You know, I mean, SEBI, I would say, is a very good example of a good regulator, but we could do a lot more on that front.
Right. So Anurag, if I can come to you, like you mentioned earlier, that yours was one segment which got affected very early on when the pandemic happened. There was a list of demands that you guys had put to the government. How much of that you guys realized, and what is still pending? We are 15 months since we had that last conversation. What kind of assistance have you guys got till now? Like Dr. Taneja was talking about, you guys don't even have a regulator that you can approach.
Oh, we don't even have a dedicated ministry. We are governed right from the local panchayat level to the union government. I mean, we have people at various levels governing upon us and making rules for us. So there could be an FSSAI, and that can be negated by the municipal corporation locally with their own sets of laws on eating house. No, I think when the whole pandemic started, what we were initially seeking from the government was some kind of a cash flow support, in the sense that defer our payments or give us some easy loans, so on and so forth, so that we can take care of people's need at that time, and which was very important. What we had not bargained for at that time was that this is going to last for such a long period of time. As things progressed, today we realized that that wasn't good enough, and we kept going back to the government seeking several benefits. I must say that under the circumstances, what we got was below my expectation for sure, because we are a very large employer of human capital. And what we were seeking essentially was to make sure that these people, these workers, their kitchen fires were kept burning. Unfortunately, it was too little too late. And yes, the credit scheme, which is the liquidity support which came off late, has been of some help. But end of the day, remember, it is still a debt which has to be repaid, and it can only be repaid if businesses come back. So overall, it's a kind of a mixed bag. A few things were very nice in terms of, like, when employees were allowed to withdraw from the provident funds, or when ESIC pooled in to pay some kind of unemployment corpus for the employees who were covered under the Act. Those were very nice gestures, and it really helped people. But overall, it left a lot to be desired. And I think now going forward, I think what we require now more than anything else is a lot of policy support, because the world has changed completely. The pre-COVID times and post-COVID era are two different worlds. And in the new world, we will need new set of policies to make sure we remain afloat. And we should look at it with a lot of positivity. This has also opened up lots of avenues for us to clean up things. And I hope somebody up there in the government will be listening to us. We have had a very good beginning in Delhi, I must say. The new excise policy in Delhi is generally a very, very welcome policy for the F&B industry. And similarly, I think it's time to relook at the whole setup of the hospitality business, deregulate it a bit. It can't be regulated at so many levels. and create a policy framework which helps the entire sector to grow. It's not bad. It's not bad to go out and eat and drink and make merry. It's one of the lowest form of entertainment.
True, true. Kanika, I'll come to you. As a sector, what are the kind of problems that you face now? This can be anything from regulatory, taxation, human resource, or even like Dr. Taneja said, FDI.
So, Pran, it's ironical that we're doing this webinar today. I've been named Jhansi ki Rani by the ministry recently because I've been fighting this war single-handedly to do certain things. But I'll tell you what my learning from COVID has been with regard to the regulator, ministry, government, all of it put together. If I had to put it in one line, at the leadership, at the PMO, at the ministry, they're doing some fantastic work. As it trickles down to bureaucracy, to regulators, etc., everything is lost. No one gives a damn. They're a joke. And, I say this on a public platform. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow for saying this. But to be very, very honest, I'm a real living example of, my company, not me, sorry, is my organization is a real living example where, we're trying to work and execute things, taking very, very huge risks in the middle of COVID, not knowing when this pandemic is going to end. And the ministry support is fantastic. I mean, you cannot imagine. I've got calls at 2 a.m. in the night, VCs done at 11 p.m. in the night by joint secretaries to help me out, tell me your problem, let's solve this. They come, I don't even go to them. I'm being asked every day, what can we do? But as it trickles down to regulators, etc., it's all getting lost in transition. There is, I think there's this big divide between vision and execution. It's very easy to dream. And, I say that as an entrepreneur. I dream of changing the world. I dream of running the largest private jet company in the world, etc. But there has to be a team behind me to execute it. And I think that's exactly what our country lacks. We have a great visionary. We've got a new cabinet of ministers who, if you look at them, like at least in my sector, I've got a minister who's Stanford, educated, passionate about aviation, understands the industry. Does he have the team underneath him to actually support him execute this? And, if you remember, Pran, we've spoken a lot of times before on different platforms. I've been the one person who's always said that we have the best regulator, best ministry, so supportive, never faced issues. All my views in the last 4 to 6 months have changed, unfortunately, because being not a victim, but, my experiences in the last 6 months, you're told, we don't know how to do this. Well, if you're trying to launch something new, you're not going to know how to do it. You've got to learn, you've got to adapt, you've got to change. And the challenge is those executing don't have the bandwidth, resources, or capability to adapt, to suggest new regulation, to bring in change. It's very easy to say, okay, let's, say open X thing in India, by the leadership or by PMO and a ministry, etc. But down below, do they know how to do it? Do they have the resources to execute it? Do they have the, the simple know-how, the knowledge, the capability? You have an aviation regulator with, being run by a lot of people who are technical and non-technical. Now, I as a stakeholder in the country, as an investor, as someone earning my money, I don't want to be going and teaching the regulator what is being done abroad or what is being done. Like, I literally sat to myself today and I said, look, I don't care if my business succeeds or not. I don't care if I succeed or not, but I'm going to pave the path for every single entrepreneur who tries to get into this industry, tries to make a change, because someone has to do it. No one did it for me, but let me do it for the rest. And, that's where we are, unfortunately. So I think there's a massive gap in, what is envisioned and what is executed. From vision to execution, I think 90% of it gets lost in transition. And I don't know about other industries as such, but at least in aviation, India is at a place where, we were touted to be the world's second or third largest market. We have the highest number of trained pilots in the world. We've got the highest number of women pilots in the world. What are we doing? There is no lack of skill. There are, every day my company receives over 200 resumes of engineers, trained, educated, with bank loans, wanting to work. 200 resumes for a small company like mine is a huge number. These guys don't have jobs. Now the government is trying to bring about a lot of change in MRO. All of us send everything abroad. Every single component is sent abroad for overhauling. Every aircraft is sent abroad for repair. Why? Because it's so expensive to do it in India. No one wants to take the risk. And then now when the governments come out with change, they're waiving off GST, they want to attract international planes coming into India, repairing themselves, etc. Where is the executing team? I personally believe pick up 5 people from the industry, say, boss, you're Gandhiji, forget your business for some time, work with the leadership, bring change, help us rewrite the rules. And some of us have to do it. There's no choice. Otherwise, we're going to be there will be COVID 1, COVID 2, COVID 242. And India, so moving forward, will only keep moving backward. That's the way I look at it.
Interesting. Sandeep, if I can come to you, from what Kanika and what Dr. Taneja was speaking, there's clearly a divide between where objectives are and where execution is sometimes. In your sector, we hear a lot about electronic manufacturing. Where is the focus on software? The software seems to be an inherent strength for us. Are we, giving it the necessary importance? Like Dr. Taneja said, the Make in India versus e-commerce debate at the moment, that also, there seems to be a dichotomy in that.
Electronic manufacturing, designing, and services remain very important vertical for India, especially in view of the large domestic consumption that we have in India. By 2025, the domestic consumption for all electronic products likely to exceed about $400 billion. So electronics would be next oil in terms of the import bill. I mean, it will surpass the oil import bill as well by 2025. So this has become all the more important from various angles. I would like to point out various initiatives that have been taken by government and the industry jointly. While industry has started maturing, to cover up what has been lost. India is largest importer of electronic, and the import come from China. So in fact, we had given a lot of business on platter to China. In fact, world over it has been the case, but India having large domestic talent and the resources could have done better. But the lost time has to be corrected. So industry has taken a lot of mature decisions and started grooming on their strength. Government has also taken a lot of initiatives, especially on the PLI front. If you see, a lot of PLIs have come on the electronic side, whether it is mobile, computer networking, components. So there are large production-linked incentive schemes, which are actually helping the Indian industry, electronic industry, to grow. Having said so, on the software front, if we say, we had the inherent strength because, in software, what plays a role is your laptop and your brain power. So that has played largely because the strength that the talent, knowledge, brain that we Indians possess. And we started doing very well for a long time and created a niche, created a name for ourselves in the software. And software also will say software, largely the software services. And this is the reason probably that the software sector has seen, although nominal growth of 3% in the pandemic period, but it has seen the growth. And now on the electronic hardware front, we have to be the next capital of the world. And the work in that direction has been started both from the industry side and the government side. We are very hopeful that the way we are doing now, by 2025, the initial estimate of 400 billion import will largely reduce, and thanks to the PLI and the initiatives taken by the industry.
So, Dr. Taneja, even if we look at how our exports is done and look at free trade agreements that we sign, we seem to ignore the services export. How do we correct this, and why is this important? Especially now that we are looking at an FTA with EU, UK.
Yeah. So on the FTA front, in the services sector, we already have agreements with 4 countries: Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, and Korea. But these were very limited in their scope, and they weren't, even the commitments were not very deep. So if you're getting into agreements with the EU and the UK, we have to be prepared for a lot more and more. The engagement is going to be very different, and the kind of commitments are going to be very different. So we need to, we need to be equipped with all of this, and we get very bogged down with what kind of commitments we're going to make, but we also need to give enough importance to the design of the agreement. And in the design of the agreement is the institutional framework, which is about how the FTA is going to be implemented. So that is going to determine the success of the agreement. So it's very important that we look at those aspects. And I think what Kanika said about capacity building runs across. So it's not just, so it's the regulator who has to be equipped with adequate capacity. It's the negotiator, the FTA negotiator, who needs the needs capacity building to be able to negotiate these agreements and to understand the nuances of these agreements. When we're signing, for instance, we have to be looking at what the domestic policies are, what the immigration policies are. The country can actually put in a clause in the domestic policy which might impact foreign labor, and the negotiator is not aware of something like that. So to be able to understand these nuances is very important, because how would you build them into your agreement is very important. And when we're talking about these agreements, I think one of the things that we might be wanting to look at is the social security dimension. We might want to look at that. But again, I would say that understanding the entire regulatory regime that exists in the foreign country, if we're talking, a lot of it is about mode 4, right? About sending people. So that's going to be very, very important. And of course, then we're talking about trade and digital services also. And there again, we need negotiating capacity to be able to build in the right clauses. And they're going to be very forward-looking clauses like the MFN forward clause or the ratchet clause or the standstill clause. We have to be prepared for all of these.
Anurag, we know there are a bunch of issues on the policy side of it, but beyond that, what are the other kind of issues that you face? This can be, finance in nature, HR, or capacity building, like we were talking about.
So right now we are at a stage where consumption is honestly the biggest problem. But we have spoken enough about the travails of the pandemic and how we are dealing with it. I think it's time now to look forward and see what we can do. Now, if you ask me, we have heard a lot about the beautiful story of the IT industry in India and how it has become such a massive thing. What brought that up? I think there was lots of skill available in the country. And then at some point of time, a dedicated ministry was created, which really put everything together, and India slowly started emerging. Lots of private sector players came in. And today, India is an IT powerhouse. I think that's exactly what food can do for the Indian tourism. I think Prime Minister has been very, very clear that tourism is one of the thrust areas for him. But what will bring people to India? And I think food can be one of them. If you look at our country, India as a culinary nation is an amalgamation of several continents. Forget about countries. I mean, look at the kind of food we have in, just one region of India will probably be equivalent to what you get in several nations of Europe put together. And we have never utilized this. And this is the time when I think we can start using food as a tool to get tourism into India and bring Indian food to the mainstream beyond a chicken tikka masala and a dal makhani. And it is very doable. Trust me, the kind of skills we have in India, the culinary skill, we may laugh about it, that, hamare yahan bawarchi banna koi badi baat nahi hai. But trust me, the kind of soft skills we have in India, if channelized well, we can become a powerhouse in no time. And then when we are talking about that, Indian talent being utilized by outsiders, Indian restaurants will start opening up globally. Rather than a McDonald's coming up, Imagine if chart is going to the Europe. So this is something that I think we need to do. And of course, I've spoken a little while back that we need to deregulate this. I'm sorry to sell a sandwich. You can't be asking me to procure 26 licenses and NOCs and permissions. That's more than what you require to get a gun license. That needs to be deregulated. If you are, all I'm saying is, if you unshackle this trade and allow it to prosper, use it as the right tool, this can become the next big growth story for India.
So I think the economic survey also 2 years ago had this entire chapter why it's easier to procure a gun in Delhi compared to setting up a restaurant. So I think the policymakers know the kind of problems that the sector faces, but somehow
the problem is there is not a single ministry which is dealing with it. So we are regulated at every level. For example, I'll give you an example. The FSSAI rules now say if you have the FSSAI license, that's all you require to run a restaurant. But go to any municipal corporation in India, they will still insist on their own trade license, calling it eating house license or whatever. Now, why this duplication? Why this duplication? You are creating unnecessary problems. If you give it a dedicated ministry, it will help the industry a lot. And there have been lots of instances in Indian businesses where a dedicated ministry has really catapulted that trade into a faster growth track.
So, Kanika, Anurag wants more tourism into India. You are someone who can get those tourists here. So, if India has to become an aviation hub, replicate what happened in the Middle East, what are some of the things that we need to do? If you were given, if you were asked for suggestions, what would those be?
And very simply put, I think India honestly is already well on its way to becoming that hub, to be completely honest. But I think we just need to, it's a very chicken and egg situation. To transit through India, you need a visa. Why? Because the country has terrorist threats, safety issues, all of that. You don't need that in Dubai, right? You float into Dubai airport, you float out of Dubai airport. In fact, people love, I've seen friends who extend from 3 hours to 8 hours at Dubai airport, 9 hours to shop, because it's become an experience by itself. We've got those airports. You look at Bombay airport, you look at Delhi airport, Bangalore, they're fantastic. We've got some of the world's best aviation infrastructure, the best team. The hospitality you get at Indian airports, God bless you. For 100 rupees, you get a goddamn porter to move all your bags around. And you land in Europe and you pay £5 for a trolley that you push your own self. So you've got everything going. I think it's just that over a period of time, it's going to be security and safety angles that need to be addressed by the government, which I think they are working on. And, once you have ease of transit through India sorted out, COVID notwithstanding, and us not being the big COVID super spreaders of the world, of course, it's going to happen. And you're seeing a lot of airlines do it. There's news about Jhunjhunwala investing in an airline, Jet Airways coming back. And, now they've made 100% FDI. The government was very particular about not allowing FDI into aviation, but having 100% FDI allowed into aviation is a huge step. So you're going to see it happen. And there are a lot of people taking the likes of Emirates head on. I don't know if you've been reading about Saudi wanting to launch an airline and making it the next Emirates. So it's going to happen in India. And India is, and I think India is well on its way to becoming a big tourism hub, launching of simple stuff like, your e-visa. It's a huge step for our country. I mean, for a country like India to enable e-visas, where you can't even get your Aadhaar card online. Okay, it's a massive, massive deal, to be honest. So I think, post-COVID, you're going to see a lot of influx of tourism into India. And that reflects in what the hotels are doing. One side, you've got traditional hotels closing down. I think Anurag sir will agree to that. And one side, you've got all these new properties, buying land, still building hotels, launching properties. And again, we should all learn from Dubai, from my own personal example. Dubai said, we're going to run this country like a company. We're not going to run it like a country. And they're literally, whatever it takes to make the country earn money, COVID, no COVID, give Indians golden visas, give Indians silver visas. Indians have all the money in the world to spend. They love shopping at Hermes, they love eating out. Welcome them in, welcome all the rich Indians in. How many Indians have got golden and silver visas in the last month? We are seeing 6 to 7 private jet movements a day happen between India and Dubai. Those many are not happening between Bombay and Delhi, guys. ridiculously enough. So, I think we need to do stuff like that. Woo the rich, be very clear. It's a company we're running. India is a nation. It is an economy. It is a company that you're running, where you let the people who have money spend their money, want to spend their money. Instead of having Indians come to Dubai and spend their money, first let's focus on the Indians spending their own money in their own country to start with. We happily pay 6,000 dirhams for a meal at Zuma, but we complain about paying 16,000 rupees at a Indian restaurant. So we've got to change that. And I don't see why tourism won't flow. The next, I think the next 6 months will define where we're going, depending on, of course, how we handle COVID.
Interesting. Sandeep, if you were to, what is the kind of support that you would want the government to give you so that, the sector becomes globally competitive?
Well, in the software, as other sectors have their handicaps, software also have handicaps. And the foremost is the capital to move in the value chain. You see, any software company would have, in terms of asset, it would have a laptop or a computer. And apart from that, it has a talent brain to work on. So the software company's biggest challenge today is the access to the capital. Most of the banks extend the credit based on some physical assets. So here we face a big challenge. Since we are doing so good in software, government has to evolve ways and means to extend the right capital inflow for the software companies, so that the software companies can focus onto the product. By and large, software in India is software service. Even today we are having this virtual session is on Zoom. Most likely the Zoom engine would have 80% or certain percentage of Indian brain behind it, and or WebEx or other platform. You see, the services are such that they have created so many products world over, but they have not created any product on its own. I mean, not so many products to get the loyalty or get the revenue in the continuous manner. So government has to focus on how to empower the software companies so that they can create the product while the software service industry remain intact. There has to be a separate vertical where we get onto giants like SAP, Zoom, WebEx, or so on. And that will create a niche, and that will create a new vertical for Indian software to grow. So I think government has to look on this earnestly.
Taneja, beyond IT, ITeS, software, what are the other service sectors that you think hold potential for India, and we should look at strengthening or developing that sector?
Yeah, before I come to your question, I just wanted to touch on what Anurag said. I'm a foodie myself, so I just can't resist coming in. And I think food is going to be a big story. And I think it's time to bring Madhur Jaffrey back on the deck, because she's done such a phenomenal job of putting the Indian cuisine in one place. And I think combining tourism and food and making it a one-point agenda for the world outside is going to be such a unique experience. And if we had to do a tourism event, an all India event, that should be the theme. It's around food. And that brings me to the recovery aspect also. The contact intensive industries, the recovery package has to be very different, and the government and the associations have to work in tandem on how to create an environment that is safe. So with developing guidelines and whatever for vaccinations and giving the consumer the comfort that it's a safe environment to be in. So there is a whole, I think that would play a very important role in recovery. And coming to other sectors that we could be looking at, I think in the new tech areas, fintech is something that has a lot of potential to grow. Medical value travel again is something that remains untapped, and we could actually be a hub for the entire South Asian region, for some of the African countries, for the Middle Eastern countries. A lot can be done on that front, and it can be really scaled up. there's a lot of potential there. But again, we're looking at a post-COVID world, and we need to be, then again thinking of guidelines and how something like that can actually be encouraged. So on the tech front, I think there is a lot of potential. The other thing is, if we're looking ahead, we might see a lot of changes in the labor market, and there will be a lot of scope for professional services. And this work from home concept has actually transported us into the future. So a lot of services now can be offered sitting at home to the rest of the world, and at 1/10 the price. So that's, it's going to, economists are already terming that as telemigration, and that's going to be the next big thing. So are we equipped for that? Should we think about regulations right away? Or should we think about it 5 years from now when it's too late, and then we don't know how our workers are struggling to do that? And they don't want to be called illegal workers or informal workers just because there isn't a proper system around it. So there's going to be a huge change on that front also.
Anurag, if you were to come up with some out-of-the-box ideas to, for your sector, I mean, one innovation probably which got a lot of press was what they tried with the restaurant industry in the UK, and paying part of the bill and stuff like that. What are some of the out-of-the-box ideas that we probably can implement?
While I quite welcome what happened in the UK, because what they were trying to do was something very logically correct. They were trying to boost consumption. Once the consumption boosts, then it starts playing a percolatory effect on everyone. However, we all know the long-term results of that were not as good as what we imagined it to be. And in a country like ours, where we are still to a large degree a welfare state, I think that is something which is, to expect something like that the government will be paying for your restaurant bill, is too much to expect. I think I will still stick to the two things that I've been saying for the last few months. What we need is liquidity support to make sure we don't die. And what we need beyond that is policy support to make sure that our trajectory of growth is changed to a far more, what I call aggressive levels, so that we can make up for whatever we have lost over last 15, 18 months because of better policies. I am not seriously of a view that India can afford to do what UK did. And I don't see how it will benefit everyone, because the sheer size of ours will not permit that. There is India and there is a Bharat. While India will welcome that, Bharat may not even understand the whole meaning of it. So I think that as an example may not work for India. But if we can think of nice policy framework, why can't you can have dedicated food parks by the government which can be run, develop them as 24/7 night center. See, if Indian economy has to grow, then there are only two things that are possible. Either your e-commerce goes far more intense, or the number of hours that you conduct a trade is enhanced. And that's why nightlife economy is something which can clearly play a big role in growing the size of the Indian industry.
But India seems to be a little allergic to the entire idea of having restaurants open 24 hours.
Sir, the problem is, Prania, that we are still living in, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be politically correct about it. We are living in some weird socialist mindset where having fun is considered crime. No, I'm sorry, this is not the India now. It may have been considered, when people went out to eat in probably 50s or 60s, it was considered a luxury. Today, it's a necessity. This is not the India we were talking about. Why should there be any restriction? Why should there be any restriction? If sectors can work 24/7, then why not F&B? If you can run your offices 24/7, why not run a restaurant? I don't see a reason. This is a mental blockade. if you want your country to become a 5 trillion economy, you have only two ways. Either enhance the number of hours where trades are conducted, and number two, intensify the e-commerce efforts. There is no other way out. Otherwise, we can keep talking about it, and we'll keep adjusting the numbers.
Kanika, beyond what we see, there are other services in the aviation sector like FBO, maintenance and repair, MRO, that you also talked about, where there is a substantial potential to grow. What do we need to do in these areas, these ancillary areas? Are we even talking about them? Are we even listening to them?
Pran, I think fortunately, again, the leadership, the ministries actually realize these things. The industry campaigned for a really long time. If you notice, as part of the COVID relief budget, the first thing that came out, the first one that the finance minister announced, there were certain relaxations on MROs regarding GST, CST, etc. It all came in as part of the COVID stimulus. Okay, but so I think the government's definitely realizing it, like I said. But again, there have been amazing schemes that have been taken out for civil aviation. Just to give you an example, they've made Gift City, where instead of airlines leasing aircrafts all the way from Ireland, you can lease them from India. But there is no one to execute them. So I think it's time to stop focusing on what more should the government do. It's time to just simply focus on, okay, they've come up with this much. How much of that 100% has been implemented? 2%, 5%, 10%, and what needs to be done to see it through, implemented, support entrepreneurs, not make them flee the country. I think that's what the government's key agenda should be. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but in the last 6 months to 1 year, I believe India has lost the maximum number of HNIs who've become residents abroad. And that's for a reason. You're not supporting your entrepreneurs. You're saying we'll do this, but there's no one to execute this. And that's exactly what if I was the government the next 1 year, I would only focus on seeing whether whatever we have envisioned, whatever we have talked about has been executed. If it's not, what do we do to execute it? Period.
Sandeep, what are the next set of opportunities for the Indian software industry, and how can we ensure that we do not miss out? Can be probably around sectors like AI, ML.
There are new sectors which are emerging, especially after the pandemic. We see the healthcare sector, it has taken the new leap. We are seeing the governance, tourism, medical. I mean, overall, we are finding a lot of new opportunities for the software sector to grow. Combined with that, we are seeing that IoT, artificial intelligence, machine learning, these are the things which are coming up. World over, autonomous vehicle, security, such sectors are the promising sector. Recently, we have seen the power of the drone, Iron Dome. So the software industry as such has to look beyond the traditional services, traditional products, and see how we can team up with the solutions. So in my opinion, we have very promising future where we are likely to excel in the new emerging technologies, quantum technologies, artificial intelligence, and IoT. These are the areas we are focusing, and we should continue to focus.
Right. So I think we are running out of time. So my last question, which would almost mean the same for everyone, and starting with you, Anurag, is how does the shape of how does the shape of recovery look like? I know we are not out of the woods yet. How does the rest of the year look?
No, this year doesn't look very great for me. I think towards the second part, there will be some amount of recovery from around December. By that time, I think a lot of vaccination would have happened. So certain sectors within F&B will start emerging out of it. But for us, the tough times are here for some more time. And this is also a time where I feel every entrepreneur needs to reimagine and retool his business. Don't live in fool's paradise. Because your restaurant did 2 crores of sale a month, you stop making assumptions that you will reach 2 crores. If you think now you can do only 1 crore a month, then please plan your business model accordingly so that you make money within that crore. And that's what I call retooling. And this is a mistake lots of people are doing. So be practical and hold on. Things will change. Eventually, people will step out to eat, because in India, eating out is much beyond just stopping your tummy. It is a matter of celebration. It's a matter of experience. So, ये वक्त मुश्किल है, निकल जाएगा लेकिन.
Kanika, what are your thoughts?
I personally think we're India. We've come out of every crisis shining, and I strongly believe we're going to come out of it stronger, smarter, braver. Not by complaining, not by crying, but we've all got to, put our best foot forward. Let's not hold the government accountable, responsible
Absolutely.
for every damn thing. We as citizens, stakeholders, entrepreneurs need to come out of this. And Pran, we didn't stop salaries during COVID, and I had a very simple point. When for the last 5 years you've been earning a profit and taking that profit home, 1 year you're making a loss, you're going to the begging bowl to every single person saying that, Acha, I'm not earning money, please help me pay salaries, please help me do this, please help me do that. What happened to all that profit that you've accumulated? What have you done with all that money? So I think, it is our responsibility to get us out of this and be responsible citizens and work hand in hand with the government to get this done.
Dr. Taneja, what are your thoughts?
I think what is really going to be a challenge is the uncertainty that uncertain times that we're in. Do we know whether the third wave is coming or not? It's wishful thinking that it shouldn't come. So we are so close to it, and yet we don't know what it's going to be like. So I'm not a businesswoman, but I can see around on the screen all of you in business. And I can quite, understand that you are remodeling your businesses based on what you think is going to be, the demand pattern and how and the consumer behavior given this scenario. So I think what we're going to see is simply new business models, and I think what the government can do is basically look at it in a very segmented manner and have a targeted approach towards the contact intensive industries and the other industries, and have a plan for both of them, because the recovery tools for both of them are going to be very different. So I think that's what the government would have to keep in mind.
Sandeep, I'll let you have the last word. What are your thoughts?
Thank you. I think we need to have a fine balance between lives and livelihood. This pandemic worst part seems to be over. And in fact, if we talk of the electronic industry, we are facing new challenges. For us, new pandemic is the semiconductor shortage, which is impacting our production. So the lead time for us has gone up to 52 weeks to 80 weeks. So I think the business during the second wave has survived well. I would say, of course, there were threat to the life and there were so many incidents. But overall, the economy has not seen such a big dent in the second wave. I hope now we have learned a lot. We will continue to grow as industry. We are facing new challenges, and I'm very hopeful that we will come out with flying colors this time also. So I'm seeing very positive results for the software and the electronic hardware industry.
Wonderful. I think we got a whole range of views, right from the restaurant industry to aviation. And it is clear that in the services segment, we can do significantly better. COVID still seems to be doing, COVID still seems to be throwing a spanner into our plans, but hopefully we can look beyond that. This webinar is a part of ETRise Top MSMEs ranking. So all of you watching it, please, check out our website, be a part of it, nominate yourself. And I would also like to thank our sponsors at this moment: Cell Global Partner, which is eBay, banking partner, Deutsche Bank, state partner, MIDC, and investment partner, Care Advisory. Of course, a huge thanks to Anurag, Sandeep, Dr. Taneja, and Kanika for being a part of this. Thank you all.